What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. And I would like to ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you share this with your family and friends across the world.
When Moses had finished speaking all these words to all Israel, he said to them, I am now 120 years old. I am no longer able to get about. And the Lord has told me, you shall not cross over this Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross over before you. He will destroy these nations before you, and you shall dispossess them. Joshua also will cross over before you, as the Lord promised. The Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, and to their land when he destroyed them. The Lord will give them over to you, and you shall deal with them in full accord with the command that I have given to you. Be strong and bold. Have no fear or dread of them, because it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, Be strong and bold, for you are the one who will go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their ancestors to give them, and you will put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Let me begin by saying Happy New Year. This first Sunday of 2021, I want to just say that I'm excited for what God can do in this upcoming year. I also don't want to say all of that without recognizing that 2020 was rough for so many. So many lives were lost to COVID-19, and I know that there are many families, hundreds of thousands of families and people that are living, or millions of people really, who are living, grieving the loss of a loved one, whether it be to the virus or some other acts that perhaps maybe the hospital couldn't take as good care of a loved one because of all of the virus patients. And so I understand that 2020 was quite rough. But I also I understand that this may sound quite crass to many, but the truth of the matter is none of us were born to live forever. And what we do is we make the best and the most of what time we do have, especially as children of God and citizens of his heavenly kingdom. And so let's dive right into this word on today. I understand that usually at the beginning of the year, so many preach sermons, and I have too, sermons about how wonderful this next year is going to be. I have no doubt that there were many who did the same thing at the beginning of 2020, and look how it turned out. Not to try to say, oh, people were wrong and all that. That's not what that's about. It's just that I think we've got to be careful because time is something that we pay attention to. God is not a person with a Timex. He's not looking at time. He is eternal. Something our brains can't even fathom. We can't even imagine something that doesn't have a beginning and an end. And so rather than try to talk about how great 2021 will be, what I would say is let's make sure that we do all we can to bring God glory with each and every day of our lives, with the words that we choose, with the way that we interact with people. We should always be thinking about bringing God glory. So now, let's look at this passage of Scripture here in Deuteronomy, where we find Moses is basically passing the baton on to Joshua. We've got the children of Israel. They've been in the desert for quite some time, some almost 40 years at this point, and Moses is letting them know that, he's 120 years old and he's not able to get around like he used to, and that the Lord had told him he's not crossing over the Jordan this time. And so he is relinquishing his role, his leadership role amongst the people, the one who had been speaking to God and speaking for God to the people. He's the one who had put in the time, walking around, hearing their complaints about not having water when they wanted it, not having food the way that they wanted it. Even God was raining down manna from heaven, and the Bible even talks about how the manna tasted, and it was like a little wafer, but it was enough to sustain them in the desert. And it's amazing to me that something that tastes like a wafer would have enough nutrients in it to take care of human bodies for all this time. And it's amazing that God was able, I guess God is able to do anything, so I guess we'll not be all that amazed that God could do something, but it is truly astounding to think that they would be fed by a thin sheet of a wafer on the ground in order to live and to make it. Even the water, when they didn't have water that they wanted, and the fact that God would deliver them and give them water when they needed it as they're out in the desert. And the Bible even lets us know that while they were out there for those 40 years, their sandals did not wear out. Their clothes didn't wear out. And so God, while the situation, I can imagine, just walking around in the desert is not a pleasant thing to do. I've never walked around the desert, and I don't plan on it anytime soon, especially not for 40 years, or walking around trying to pitch a tent here and there. That is not something I desire to participate in, but just the fact that God could take care of his people all out in the desert, and make sure they were fed, and fed enough to be healthy. Because we don't find in the Bible where all these, where they caught a whole lot of diseases and they were just passing out by the wayside, people just dying all over the place. That is not what was happening. God was taking care of his people. Now, a whole generation did die out in the 40 years, but we have a God who's able to keep his people in some of the most harshest conditions that I can think of for keeping a group of folks. And so as I look at this, God was taking them to a land that had been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to their forefathers. There's this land that had been promised, and God is being true to his word. And it is amazing that we sometimes seem to forget that when God says something, it means that it's going to happen. When we look in Genesis, right there at the beginning, we find that God just spoke and things were created. He did not have to tediously labor with his hands and try to find materials here and there. He spoke it and it happened. And so what we've got to understand is that when God says something is going to happen, it's like it's already done. And so they were going to occupy this land that was promised unto them, unto their forefathers, even though there was somebody already in the land. And what I love about it is God didn't tell them through Moses to take up arms and to go fight for the land or anything like that. Moses was letting them know that God was going to go before them and he would clear the land out for them to take possession of the land. And it's amazing because I love what that could mean for you and I today as we serve God and walk as citizens in his kingdom. What it means is that when God has a place assigned for you, he will actually clear the way for you to be there. He will make sure that it's ready and prepped for you to occupy the space that he has designed for you. And nothing, even if somebody was in the space that shouldn't be there, he will clear them out of the way and you will occupy the space that was meant for you. Now, before you get too excited, I do need to let you know that sometimes when God has a space for us, it doesn't mean that it's plush and, we got gold toilets and all of that. It doesn't mean that these worldly things that we value are what the space is supposed to be about. And I do get it. Some of y'all will say, well, no, now wait a minute, Pastor. The Lord said he's taking them to a land that's flowing with milk and honey. I got that. But if we slow down and think about what it means for a land to be flowing with milk and honey, first of all, we've got to understand that that was just a terminology to mean that the resources that were necessary would be there. That they would not be having to, start from scratch, but the resources are going to be there. So, because we know that there was, if we read the Bible, we understand is that when they got to the land, there was no fountains that had milk and honey flowing from them. What we find, though, is that what God is saying is that he will provide. That's what that means. And so what that tells us then is that God, when he is going to provide a space for us, he will give us everything that is necessary for us to be successful, not for ourselves, but to bring him glory. We've got to remember that at the center of our lives, as citizens of the kingdom, we are to bring God glory. That is our purpose. And no matter what we go through, no matter some of the hardships that we may have to endure, the suffering that we may have to do, then that is not the issue. The issue is we bring God glory. We've got to understand that is the primary essence and goal that God has for our lives. We are to be those who love people that need love. We are supposed to be in spaces and places that edify the Lord. Now, and I do need to say just a quick word about suffering, because every now and then it's almost as if we forget that we are on earth and that sin is abundant and abounding all over the place and that we will have suffering. Just because we're in church, just because we love the Lord, doesn't mean that we get to escape suffering. Suffering is something that Christ did. And I don't know how we're going to be followers of Christ and think that we're not going to suffer. We've got to understand that God has a plan for our lives, and his plan is so that we would be victorious, but we're victorious in him. And we show our victory by continuing to love him and to love those that need love, all because he first loved us. And so this is the type of God that we serve. And so as the people are here and Moses is talking to them and handing off the baton to Joshua, he's telling them, you got to be strong, and you've got to be bold and courageous. You've got to do these things even though you're with God. Isn't that amazing? You've got to be strong and courageous and bold even though God is right there with you. And what that tells me is that we have an assignment that even if God is right there with us, he's walking with us, he can make a way for us, we still got to be bold in him, which means we've got to use our mouths. We got to use our tongues. We got to quit being scared to talk about his goodness. Because all too often, as Christians, we'll sing it up in church. We'll sing over the pews and shout folk all over the place in the church house. But then when we go out into the world, we act like we can't talk about from whence our help comes. We won't lift his name. We're afraid to pray over our meals in public because we don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. We won't, if somebody says that they're having a hard time, we won't grab their hands and begin to pray for them right there on the spot because they need the Lord. See, these are the types of things where we've got to be courageous and strong and bold, because the world is not something that's bent towards God. The world is bent towards itself, and it's bent towards sin. And in order for us to give God glory, we've got to be bold enough to speak on behalf of who God is. whether the other person accepts it or not. And so God will clear space for you. God will make a way for you. And what you will find is that we serve a God who is perfectly capable of opening up doors for you and allowing you to occupy the spaces that he has for you. So often we miss the space that God has for us because we're not listening to him, we're not praying enough, and we're not bold enough to speak on his behalf. So I'm asking you, today, would you speak for him? Would you be bold for him? Would you occupy the space that he has for you? Because that's where he needs you. The assignment is for you. It's not for me. It's not for anybody. He's got assignments for each one of us, and he loves us just that much to give us an assignment for us to be the kingdom citizens that he called us to be. Occupy your territory. Do that today, and do it all throughout the year 2021. May God bless you. May he keep you, is our prayer.
Thank you for joining us again today, and Happy New Year. Hope you all had a great time. But before we leave, I will ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this with family and friends across the world. And if you are so led to donate to this channel, the link is in the description below. Head there, check it out, and may God be with you.